I don't want to be hostile, but I want to correct you.
Well, you are hostile, and I'm fine with that.
Okay. You said what?
You can't say you want an honest man and then start the conversation with a half truth. Because once the numbers start changing, credibility changes with it. And that's exactly what happened on Kendra G's live stream. A caller said she had 4 children by 2 men, but that wasn't actually the full story. Watch this.
Do you have any kids?
I have 4.
Okay, how old are your 4 kids?
20, she's about to be 21, 16, 13, and 2.
Okay, all by the same man?
2.
So right there, everybody watching already has the picture. 4 children, 2 fathers, clear. But listen to what happens when Kendra circles back and asks the question again.
Let me ask this question. How many men do you have kids by?
Okay, so sperm donor wise, because I know how you are, is 3.
And boom, now it's 3. So we just went from 2 to 3. And that's where credibility starts slipping.
What you said in the beginning. In the beginning, you said you had 2 kids. You said it was 2 men. You didn't say 3.
Okay, so I have 4 kids by 3 different men.
Okay.
Not because of the children, not even because of the past. The issue is the numbers changing. Because when the math shifts mid-conversation, people start looking at the whole situation differently. Now, instead of simply saying, okay, let me clarify that, the explanation starts expanding. Now the conversation includes who raised the first child, the marriage history, and other contexts. But the original question was simple. How many men fathered the children? Sometimes when someone starts over-explaining under pressure, they end up revealing more than they intended. Because the more details get added trying to fix the first answer, the harder it becomes to keep control of the conversation. And at that point, people start focusing on everything that was added after the fact. And this is where the conversation really goes left.
I don't want to be hostile, but I want to correct you.
Well, you are hostile, and I'm fine with that.
Okay. You said what?
I said you are hostile, and I'm fine with that.
Well, here's the thing, Roma. I'm not hostile. What I'm not going to do is allow you to lie to me and then make it my
not lying. It's when you're married with someone for so long and that person take on your child, you honestly, I want to say forget, but my ex-husband took care of the child that I had at 14 years old. So I have 4 children by 3 different men, and that's where it is.
So let me jump in. I'm not hostile. What I'm not going to allow you to do is lie. So I have to correct the lie. So the question is, at the end of the day, I just asked you a simple question. How many kids do you have by? You said 2. That's not the answer. So you're not going to call me hostile. I'm just correcting the fact and exposing the fact you lied to me. That's all that it is. We wouldn't even be here this long had you just told me it was 3 men and we would have kept going.
Because now the host becomes the problem. Ad hominem attacks usually show up when someone can't move past the issue being discussed. So instead of addressing the point, the conversation shifts to attacking the person asking the question. And that tends to weaken credibility. Then the credentials come out, talking about her education and her degrees. But education proves you can meet the expectations of a class. It doesn't automatically mean you're applying that same judgment in real life. Those are 2 very different things. This is something you hear men talk about a lot in online dating conversations. Sometimes education gets used almost like a signal of character, as if having degrees automatically proves someone has integrity or strong judgment. But academic success and relationship judgment aren't the same thing. Integrity shows up in behavior. Another moment that stood out was when the circumstances around her first pregnancy came into the conversation. At first, she said she didn't want to discuss that situation because she wanted to protect her daughter. And that's fair. People are allowed to keep certain details private. But once the numbers changed and Kendra called it out, the traumatic circumstances around that first pregnancy became part of the explanation. Now, let me be clear. Acknowledging trauma matters, but protecting private details doesn't require changing the basic facts. Someone can keep the circumstances private while still being honest about the number of fathers. Those are 2 separate things. Another thing that stood out was the income discussion. She said she prefers a man making around $250,000 a year. That's a very specific standard. But she also said the father of her youngest child made around that same amount. So that tells us something important. Income wasn't the issue in that relationship, which means the conversation probably isn't about financial standards. It's about relationship outcomes. Because if someone has already been in a relationship with the exact type of man they say they want, and it still didn't work out, At some point, the discussion shifts from what someone wants to the patterns in the relationships themselves. And this is something I've noticed from watching shows like Kendra G's and Kevin Samuels for a long time. Most of the women who call in are already familiar with the format. They know the questions Kendra asks: children, fathers, income, expectations. Those are the same things men want to know when they're evaluating a relationship. So when someone voluntarily calls into the show and then becomes defensive when those questions come up, that's usually where the tension starts, because the questions aren't random. They're the exact things people want answers to. If someone isn't comfortable answering them honestly, a live stream dating show probably isn't the best place to be. When you step back and look at the whole exchange, you can see a pattern unfold. First, there was lying by omission, then the explanation started expanding, then trauma entered the conversation, then the host became the problem, then the focus shifted to income standards, and finally, the conversation leaned on credentials. Once those patterns start stacking up, the discussion stops being about the past. It becomes about credibility. And credibility matters because when people are evaluating a relationship, they're not just looking at attraction. They're looking at judgment, transparency, and whether someone can answer direct questions without the story changing. So when the numbers shift and the conversation becomes defensive, most men don't argue about it. They simply adjust how they evaluate the situation. The issue here wasn't the past. The issue was how the story unfolded once the questions became direct. Because when the facts start shifting, people stop debating. They start reassessing. But I'm curious what y'all think. Do you think she actually lied? Or do you think she was just explaining the situation the way she sees it? And when someone is looking for a serious relationship, how important is it for the basic facts of their life to be clear from the start? Because if the numbers change once, does that make you question the rest of the story? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments respectfully. And if you enjoy conversations like this, where we look at the behavior, the patterns, and the outcomes, make sure you like the video, hit that hype button, and subscribe so you don't miss the next discussion. Go ahead and hype the video if you want to see more breakdowns like this. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video. Peace.